Thank you for joining us on the Author Talk Show for deep dive conversations with today's most brilliant authors as they share their story in a way you've never heard before. This episode was made possible in part by your friends at BookLogix, the people who help write, publish, and market your next book. Visit them at booklogix.com. Here's your host, Rich Casanova.
All right, Rich Casanova here. We are live at our pop-up satellite studio at Serendipity here in Buckhead, and we're now launching a pilot concept show called the Author Talk Show. And it's being broadcast on the PBC networks worldwide and all of our syndicated platforms. And, of course, you can check it out on our website, probusinesschannel.com. And speaking of authors, man, do we have a great lineup for you guys here today. We have three subject matter experts in the space from three different perspectives. And let's jump right into it right now. And if y'all would just kind of introduce yourself, as we mentioned beforehand, and tell us a little bit about what you're bringing to the marketplace and how people would get in touch with you in 17 seconds or less. So, Neil, we go back away. So, Neil, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Hey, Rich. I am Neil Howe. I'm the author of the Trust Factor book, which is unlocking the power of the subconscious mind to create authority, credibility, and trust. And everything that I do revolves around authority positioning.
All right. And Jane?
Hi, Rich. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show today. I'm Jane Bishop, owner of Take the Next Step and author of The Bread Box, Life by the Slice. I invest in others and help them go for their it.
You've said that before, yeah. You had that locked and loaded, ready to go. And then joining us, we call a walk-on guest here, right?
What's up, yeah.
Yeah, Amy here at Serendipity Labs reached out to Brian, and you're joining us here in the studio. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Brian A. Prince. I'm a visual storytelling artist, as well as a stunt actor for film. And I'm currently working on a graphic novel series called Manifester.
Yeah, and you've got interesting backstories. You got a few stories. You could have we could have you on 4 different shows. Yeah, and also joining us in the studio in our show is our engineer, Nick. Introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Just hope we have a good show.
All right, I should talk more like that. Yeah, Neil's nodding his head. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into it. So Neil, kind of kick us off. Well, actually, I'll do a quick bio about yourself. So you're not just an author, and you're going to talk about this, is that authority and what you kind of part of your secret sauce, right? But and so you're drinking your own Kool-Aid. You're a best-selling author and an entrepreneur. Neil Howe, he helps professionals leverage their knowledge to gain authority, status in their industry, then uses that authority marketing, and that's really the operative word, right? To get them national media attention. Neil is a contributing writer for Small Business Trendsetters and Business Innovators magazine. He's also been featured in major media outlets, including Fox, ABC, and CNN. Now you're just bragging and dropping names, whatever. And PBC. And 3 more initials on there. Now on PBC. Yeah, now you've arrived. And you also host Business Authority Radio, which you did a pilot series in our Buckhead studio, Craig, and back in the day. Uh-huh. All right. And finally, Expert Profiles Atlanta podcast and the Trust Factor radio shows, which is your book. And I'm sure they're going to be deep dive into that, right?
Excellent.
So talk to us about a little bit of your background. And each of y'all, I'm going to have you share a little bit about your backstory, your personal story before we jump into the book. So your life story, and I'll give you 19 seconds on that one.
Life story in 19 seconds. Here we go. All right. I got a little bit of an accent here. I've been from Scotland originally, but been in the States now for 24, going on 25 years. And I've done many things. So I've done real estate. I was a teacher. I've done SEO, and SEO is my passion until I got to a point where I found something that just blew SEO away. Yeah. And that was positioning yourself as the authority in the marketplace. I always say there's 2 different kinds of search. There's somebody searching for somebody to help them with a service.
Right.
And once they've found that service, so if you're looking for a plumber in Atlanta, you're going to search Atlanta plumber. But you get a bunch of results, and now you still have to choose, which is the second search.
Right.
The second search. So, at that point, you're looking for the most credible person, and that is the deciding factor of who you're going to choose to do business with.
Right.
So my focus is on helping those business people, professionals, coaches, consultants, position themselves as that authority so that they are the ones that are chosen over the competition.
Yeah, so it's not just their ranking and the ad words, whatever, right? It's actually where they're perceived and as an authority in that space, right? Subject matter expert.
Yeah, well, there's so much on reviews and reputation and things right now, and that has been a focus for a good amount of years. But if you look at like a doctor's website, if you find a doctor's name or you get a recommendation or a referral or something like that, you go and look for them online. And the only thing that you're going to find about them generally is a directory that lists, 100 other doctors that you might choose from as well. Same with lawyers. They're notoriously bad at, positioning themselves that actually tells their story and how they're going to be able to help somebody. So, I challenge people to go and look at yourself as well when you're searching online. What is coming back? Is it coming back stuff that you control, like your LinkedIn, your Facebook, your website, maybe different directories that you're listed on, or is it coming back with third-party recommendations from, different sites, especially those authority sites like Pro Business Channel,
All right.
or ABC,
All right.
NBC, CBS, Fox, and that's what people, I think, are really looking for, is that third-party credibility.
Yeah, because we can, it's one thing to speak about yourself, and you should do that as your personal branding. But like you said, when you have, not in addition to a third party, but that significant entity, it just really raises the bar and your fees and so forth and so on, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about this, the number one problem that's facing these folks.
Well, Rich, you are helping people with that number one problem, and I think that number one problem is obscurity. It's simply there aren't enough people that know about you and what you do. So you've got to get your message out there, and you've got to get noticed. I say there's three things, and it goes back to the old know, like, and trust.
Right.
First, people have to know you. You've got to capture attention, and we're in the digital attention span economy right now to where, I think we're at about 8 seconds, which is less than a goldfish.
Right, exactly. I've read that study, yeah.
We don't have attention anymore, so you've got to do something different, and that's where the authority platforms come in, because people recognize what these authority logos are. And, going back into the book, I talk about the subconscious mind. People are making decisions before they even read anything about you.
Oh, yeah.
They're making instant decisions, and that's like the primal brain. And this is all backed up by neuroscience. And, neuromarketing is something that is really becoming really popular, looking at these stats. But people are making decisions about you before they even read anything about you. So you've really got to use these logos, like you have the logos up here. These are all recognized logos, and that's what's capturing people's attention, rather than just posting a blog on your own website. It's not really cutting it these days.
Well, that was one of our observations early on. Is as excited we are about our brand, the Pro Business Channel. Let's not just our mantra is converting conversations to content. So I go to a lot of events, as I'm sure you guys do, and it's amazing what you learn, but it just vaporizes because it wasn't captured. So it's all over our site and a part of our DNA that we want to take these conversations and convert them into content, like Neil was talking about here in the studio. So we then take this show, will then be permeated and distributed across 30 some odd other platforms where there's those audiences will find out about your message. So Neil, hold tight for a second, because our second segment, you have your books right here. We want to talk about that, right? And we want to talk about go back to this authority and the trends, right? But let's talk to Jane here just for a second. So Jane, same to you as well, right? So what's your backstory before you got to where you are today, right? I'll give you 22 seconds.
22 seconds. Well, if that was 17 seconds that Neil took. Wow, 22 seconds. I don't know, Brian. What do you think?
Now you have 18, yeah.
You got it. Go for it.
I have a lot of my backstory, as anybody does, because everybody has their own story.
Absolutely.
Basically, I am doing, as a business owner, what I've been doing all of my life, just in different contexts, Rich. I've been in the academic athletic world as a coach and a teacher. I was in the corporate world, and now I'm in the solopreneur business owner world. And the thing about it, we often hear that people reinvent themselves, transform themselves, which are great. I like to think I've just continued to hone my skills as I've changed environments, because my passion has not changed about investing in people and helping them, tap into their it factor and be the best they can be. Growing up as a military kid, that has helped me, because the first 18 years of my life, I lived in 11 different cities, 4 different states. and 1 foreign country.
Wow.
In fact, the longest that my nuclear family, my parents and 3 brothers and I lived in one place was 3 years in Germany.
Wow.
So I learned to adapt quickly and take into an appreciation where I was at the moment.
Was that Ramstein in Germany, or because my brother was in the Air Force and.
No, it was Pirmasens was the army, or as they say, Pirmasens was the army base. But we went to Ramstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jane, we're going to come back to you in just a second and deep dive on how you're helping people right now and about your book. Brian, so
Yo.
how much time do you need? But yeah, tell us.
I can sum it up. Like,
Okay.
It's you just want like the life story, or
Yeah.
yeah. I'm a visual storytelling artist. Fancy way of saying I draw comics.
But before now, you're talking about what you're doing now. I want to
Yes.
say from whence you came, right?
yeah. So I've been drawing since I was about 8
Okay.
8 or 9, as long as I can remember. It's just something I always really enjoyed to do. It wasn't until later, or recently actually, I realized it was just me. That was my focus coping mechanism.
Okay.
But I've always enjoyed telling stories. And so when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to go to art school. So I did 3 years at Kennesaw State, and then I wanted to do more storytelling-based artwork. So I transferred to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta, actually down the road.
Yep.
And I graduated from there 2013 with a degree in sequential art.
Sequential art. What is that?
That is the fancy word for graphic novels and comic books.
Okay.
That's what we say to sound fancy and stuff.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It was basically comics Hogwarts, like my time at SCAD.
Right, nice.
But no, it was great. And then along with that, I'm also a stunt performer for film. I got into that.
I know, I saw that. So
Yes.
on your bio, your resume here, it includes some stunts, acting, film, The Predator. Tell
Yes.
me about that.
Yeah, so the Predator film that just came out this last month, that's me in the suit.
Dang.
Yeah.
Whoa. Can I get an autograph here or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so-
a trip. Wow.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm 6'10", and so I've been doing parkour. It's like a physical discipline.
That's what Amy was
Yeah.
saying. This dude, he's 6'10", does parkour. I'm like, I got to meet this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that for 10 years. That led to me doing stunts for film, and I've been doing kind of all 3 of those things primarily, like comics, stunts, parkour. And the reason I always mention all 3 is because they've all affected each other. Like you can see like the artwork, like visual storytelling helped with my acting, and then parkour and movement helped with my art, and they all kind of.
So have you been on? Are you going to be on an upcoming American Ninja Warrior or no?
No, not that one. I actually was almost on that once. But
Oh, yeah?
I didn't. Wasn't my
It's a
cup.
trip, yeah. I've been on it several times when I'm on the couch watching it.
Yes.
That's about the extent of it. Yeah. Okay, so we want to get back to Authority and Neil, but so Brian, tell us about the current book you're working on.
The current book I'm working on it's a graphic novel series. My publisher is Simon & Schuster, and it's like a youth 9 to 11-year-old adventure story. Yeah.
That's it's not a children's book, right?
It's definitely child accessible, but
Okay.
I'm trying to do something that all audiences could enjoy, but I'm really trying to hit like a demographic of like 9 to 12-year-old boys.
Because I want to get your quick thought on this. I mean, the children's book thing is just really like blowing up. It's huge, right?
Yeah.
It seems
It's
like every
taken off.
celebrity and every person, and it's almost something I could, Nick, could you write a children's book, right? Probably, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
A man of few words, yeah. But no, I mean, that's where what's his name? Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
He has that children's book, and he jokingly says like it only has like a couple of words in there, "mama," "dada," and it's all pictures, whatever. Yeah.
I think what's cool about that too is like the funny thing with children's books is we'll do these illustrative, fun to digest stories that are good for kids to learn. But what I'm trying to do, I'm basically trying to do the same thing for a like late middle school, early high school audience of like something fun, action packed, but at the same time a lot of like lessons in there.
Yeah, the lessons.
Time.
I mean, that's the operative word, right? Because a lot of the kids' movies, the Disney or especially Dr. Seuss, it was to a children's audience, but when you on the adult level, there's these principles that really
Yes.
like apply and come into play. So, all right. So, Neil, talk to us about the trust factor here. What's the mission and the project there in the book?
Well, I mentioned a little bit more about it. It's about unlocking the power of that subconscious mind in the minds of your prospects to develop that authority, credibility, and trust. And ultimately, it comes down to trust. You can know and like somebody, And I know, like you, Rich,
we're working on the
we're
trust
working
thing.
on the trust
That's a
still.
little awkward. Yeah,
Trust?
you got to earn it or whatever. Yeah, I respect that. Yeah.
Do you have low trust or high trust?
Well, I got to read the book first. Apparently, yeah. The title is called The Trust Factor. Yeah.
So it really is about developing that trust. The know, like, and trust. First of all, you have to be known, and that's countering that obscurity problem that everybody has. But then you have to keep your message going, and like you said, Jane, everybody has a story. And they want to tell that story, whether it's on a podcast format like this, which, Rich and I both believe in very strongly. Everybody has a story to tell.
Yeah.
I think the statistics out there is about 84% of people want to write a book. Only
84.
Yeah, I think only 1% of people eventually do.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier that it's getting a little bit easier to actually publish the book through self-publishing yourself.
Right. What's the hurdle for that? What's the challenge for people not that of those 1% that get to there?
I think they just don't know how to start. There's definitely a formula for doing it. One of the easiest ways to do it that I've found is on a medium such as this, the podcast. You can talk out your story through, bullet points, and you can have a great deal of content that you can use so many different ways. It can be repurposed so many different ways, and a book is just one of them. But once you have that book, it becomes your centerpiece, your marketing piece. It's something that you can go up on a podcast, radio show, tour. You can get yourself on television to talk about that book. And that ultimately is where the trust comes in. If you are trying to make a decision between, going to a dentist that from your meetup group that seems like a pretty nice guy, he seems to know what he's talking about, or a recommendation from somebody who has written a best-selling book on, the dental work, root canals, or whatever it might be. And
that's a book I'd love to read, yeah.
And is the authority on, the local news. He's called in to give his expert opinion. Who are you going to choose?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to choose the one that has the most trust.
Looking at your book right here, I'm looking at chapter, looks like, or page 87, creating brand loyalty. Talk to us about that. How does a company, because we're on the business channel, so as a listener, what are some takeaways in that chapter?
I think brand loyalty is just about knowing, first of all, who you are, and then what you stand for. I don't know if anybody's heard of Frank Kern here. He is one of the highest paid consultants in the digital space. But, his motto is, show that you can actually help people by actually helping them.
That's a novel idea,
Yeah, I know. And I think that's, what we have to do. You have to reach out. You have to share your message. You have to share that not only you have the authority, but you have the empathy and that you understand people's problems and that you are willing and able to solve them. And I think that is the kind of brand message that you want to share. It's not necessarily about branding and making sure that your logo is out there everywhere. Well, that's important. It's sharing your brand story that is the most important part, so that people can relate to you and understand that, yes, this is the person that I want to do business with.
And I should mention, if anybody wants to jump in with a question, feel free. This is an open panel discussion, so jump in with a follow-up question if you like as well.
Follow-up comment.
Yeah, sure.
Rich, I love what you said, Neil, about show people that you want to help them and then actually help them.
Yeah.
I mean, that is key. That aligns perfectly with, kind of the objective of my book. But I appreciate you sharing that, because a lot of people, that demonstrates that you are caring and that you are invested in people.
And the follow-through.
Which helps the trust factor.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
100%. So Jane, talk to us about your book, The Bread Box. And is this your first book, or...
This is my first book, yes.
Well, congratulations
one of
on that.
several. Thank you very much.
We'll insert the applause here in a moment. Yeah.
Yes, applause.
Yeah, congrats.
My book, gentlemen, since you all on the out there in Radio Land should see the great group of guys I'm with. I can, so I'll just take them all in for you. Anyway, it's a series of personal narratives, and then at the end of each narrative are activities to encourage the reader to create their own slices of life. And I believe I'm an expert at living life by the slice. And part of that was my early upbringing, as I mentioned before.
Living life by the slice.
Living life by the slice. And so I share these personal narratives and encourage people to create their own so that they have a storehouse of moments in life, mile markers that they can draw from their own inspiration and their own encouragement. And the activities, I use kind of a coach approach because I'm a professional credential coach. So it's challenging people to tap into where they are.
And what Neil was talking about a minute ago, and it kind of piggybacks what you just said, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that one of the things about personal branding, sometimes it's people they feel like they don't want to brag about themselves, right? I mean, people told me recently, it's like, Rich, you've created this network. We have 500,000 downloads, all the syndication, so forth and so on, and we're creating some traction. We've had some pretty amazing guests in there, but I always feel like for one reason or another, I'm like, I don't want to be the face of the channel or front and center. It's more about the company or the brand, but at some point you got to step up, right?
Right, and a lot of people have a problem with that, the imposter syndrome. And,
I didn't know it had a name to it. Yeah, I love that. Write that down, imposter syndrome.
It's a thing.
It is. It's where you live in the land of self-sabotage.
Yeah. One of the things that I use to counter that is what we call the humble brag.
Okay.
And yes,
I like that
you
one.
are positioning yourself, but while you're doing that, you're thanking everybody. So,
nice.
Rich, I want to thank all the people over the years that have been into the studio, that have told their stories. We've now had over 500,000 downloads. We're recognized as an authority. So you're really praising somebody else and giving gratitude to somebody else while still positioning yourself as that authority.
Kind of to the collective community rather than just Rich Casanova as a person. Yeah, so I love that.
I feel like between Predator and art school, I could write a book on the imposter syndrome. It's just it plagues a lot of creative people because it's something you kind of enjoy doing, and then it becomes the thing you do, and then suddenly people are like, "Oh, I love you do this." You're like, "I'm just kind of I'm faking it. I'm not."
Yeah.
I don't have no idea what I'm doing, and that's what you're thinking to yourself. And but you can't see yourself the way that they see you. And I mean, exactly what you're saying. It's just you got to kind of just take it and humble brag and be aware of it.
Have you experienced some of that personally yourself?
Oh yeah, right. No, the entire time. Half of the time I was on Predator.
Well, because you're doing your thing that you enjoy, your passion.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily looking to be out front or bragging about it, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, because some that has a negative connotation, right? And some people do that, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I was in radio out in California, early on, and I was there on the air for a number of years. But at some point, I did a lot of their live events. So I'd be in the studio, but then I'd go out and do all their live events, and then. I remember first time somebody came up and asked me for my autograph.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, that's a big one.
It was just weird, right?
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not going to sign an autograph, right? Yeah.
It's funny, I have it worse with the with artwork, with my comics work than I do with the acting, because with the acting and stuff, it's something I no pun intended, fell into. And so I kind of I'll figure it out. But then when I'm sitting at my art table doing this thing I've been doing for most
Since
of my
8
life,
years,
I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it hits a lot harder. Yeah.
Well, Rich, this imposter factor, as Brian, you mentioned, is really prominent and drives a lot of people's lives. And one of the personal narratives in my book is called Actual Size.
Yeah, I saw that chapter.
It's a takeoff on driving down the interstate in Atlanta and seeing a little smart car in the midst of the sea of these huge, vehicles. And basically, there's a lot of people trying to be somebody they're not.
Yeah.
So not only in the trust factor with other people, they have lost or have not or have disengaged the trust in themselves.
Right.
So they've lost tapping into their own it factor. Nick and I were talking prior to the broadcast. Nick is the only person that can bring the Nick factor to the table.
Nice.
All of us around the table. So when you are your actual size, in other words, you stay in your lane and you embrace who you are, that minimizes the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, being honest about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice. I agree for sure. Yeah, it's something I definitely have to check myself on a lot. But at the same time, I feel like the more I talk about it openly, I'll mention it, and someone else will be like, "Oh my gosh, I feel that way too." And then
exactly, because you're telling your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Jane, I was just looking through your table of contents, and Can you explain the you in zone? Like, what chapter is that about?
The unzone.
The unzone, yeah.
Well, not to give away the full little personal narrative, but basically it's unplugging, creating some aspect of your life and practicing an unzone. Unzone yourself from your phone. Remove yourself from those daily things that we are so keyed into. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it starts with 10 minutes a day. Put your phone on silent for 10 minutes a day. You're in that unzone. You can be more focused. You can be less distracted. So, and then there's some activities at the end of that little narrative, Nick, like the others, about how to create those unzones for yourself.
You have to read the book to get the rest of the story.
That's right.
That's
little teaser.
A teaser in the business. Yeah. Neil, you just really kind of opened this Pandora's box on this imposter syndrome. I never really put a label on it, right? So how would you coach someone, or anybody can jump in on this, how would you coach someone to get past that? And when I say someone, I'm talking about me.
Mm-hmm. Well, this phrase expert is thrown around a lot. Mm-hmm. There are a ton of experts out there, but people are uncomfortable calling themselves an expert. And you don't go around and say, hey, I'm the expert in this.
Yeah.
You look at people like Dave Ramsey, who's, one of the most recognized people in the financial world.
Right.
He sticks to one specific thing within that financial world, which is, micro-specialization, which is what I call it, is one little thing, and he's a master at that. He is an expert at that, but he doesn't go around calling himself an expert.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to position yourself as the expert, you should be trying to position yourself as the educator and the advocate for the success of your clients.
I love that.
And once people understand that that's where you are, they're going to see you as the expert. You don't have to go around sharing that message. And it's definitely a really hard thing for people to get over. And, we talked about that imposter syndrome. But if you really change your focus and say, what does it mean to be an expert anyway? If you put yourself in a position that you are willing and able to help somebody, say you are a plumber, and you've gone through school and you know how to solve problems.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. It's about solving problems. I don't know anything about plumbing, so I need somebody to solve my problem. If you, Rich, are willing and able to do that, then you are an expert in my eyes.
So talk to us about, in your book, obviously one of the chapters that jumps off the page to me is starting a podcast.
Right.
So we're on a podcast right now. This is the sandbox we play in. So I'd be interested to hear why you would encourage someone. What's the win there, right, with a podcast? What can people do with that?
There's a couple of things. First of all, podcast guesting is really powerful, and that is just going from show to show and sharing your message. That is one aspect of podcasting that I advise everybody to do, because you're giving your message to a different audience every time. But also, and it gives you authority in that position as well, being a guest. But also as the host of a podcast, it also gives you that authority, and it gives you the opportunity to speak to people in your ideal target market that you might want to do business with later. And, you're going to learn, you're going to interact with these people, which is the thing that I've got most out of podcasting, is just the amount of knowledge that you get from talking to all these experts. It really positions you as, a place to build your education level.
I mean, it's just in my experience, moving from radio to podcasting, which we call is the new radio, right? Mm-hmm. Content on demand. Just having the studio, it's been like a think tank. I mean, I'm there with just fascinating people from around the world that have flown into Atlanta and so forth, shared their story. I mean, billion-dollar brands to startups to iconic, entities and so forth. I mean, it's just been fascinating. But okay, so we're running a little bit short on time, so a little bit more roundtable here. So before we forget, Neil, best way to people find out about you and your book and whatever you want to kind of call to action, if you would?
Best way to find out me is to go to theauthorityarchitect.com, and to find out more about the book is neilhowetrustfactor.com.
Okay, and thank God for spell check on architect and all. Right. All right, so Neil, hold tight. We got some follow-up questions for you. But Jane, before we give out, again, your call to action, talk to us about this 5 behaviors of a cohesive team assessment tool facilitator. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's a intersection of the DISC assessment, which, if you know anything about that, that's a self-awareness, self-discovery tool, and Patrick Lencioni's, which I always mispronounce his last name, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's taking those 5 dysfunctions, connecting them with the DISC behavior so that teams can better understand where their low trust factors, where their lack of conflict, working their way up to being a fully functional team. And it's a training that I offer to teams, businesses, teams within large organizations. It can be done all at once if they want to go full dive in for 3 days, or we do it in modules.
So it's not the 3 days like Tony Robbins where they're firewalking or whatever. They're up till 4 a.m. in the morning.
In fact, I do not recommend doing it in 3 days. I recommend doing it by modules because that gives a team time to process, absorb, and apply.
Yeah, that's a great approach. So, Brian, how would folks find you?
I primarily use Instagram and Twitter. It's at the BA Prince, and my website is thebaprince.com.
B.A. Prince.
Yes, that's my initials.
I know, I see the initials, but it's kind of funny, like
B.A. Prince.
B.A. Prince, yeah.
Or yeah.
Exactly. I get it. So what's next? Or are you still involved with SCAD, with that community? Or
not really. The main thing right now is I'm working on my graphic novel series. That's what I was doing earlier today. Before that's why
Amy pulled you away. Amy said, "Get over here quick!" Yeah,
I was working with my friend who's a writer, and we were spitballing ideas. And
give a shout out to your friend there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, shout out to John Rock. You're awesome. Just to give it like a brief about the book because I'm more in process, but still. There's 3 main things I wanted to do. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So there's 3 things I'm trying to do with this series. First and foremost, it's like kind of a fun combination of the acquired skills that I've had from the last few years and the years before that in school, and I wanted to do something very fun and exciting for like a youth audience. But the other 2 things I wanted to do are a little bit more impactful. I think a lot of people downplay like how important fictional media is, especially these days. It's more important than it's ever been before, and I think, since a lot of people are just kind of pumping fiction out there, I think it's kind of our responsibility as storytellers to really leave audiences with, things to think about and ways to think about themselves. And so with my story, there's 2 things I want to hit on. One is representation. So I wanted to have a lot of characters of color in the story for no other reason than that they are there. Right. As a person of color, it's sometimes a little frustrating when the only time you're on screen or on the page is when it's like I used to be a slave or something like that.
Right,
and you're like,
playing
okay, cool,
that character,
but, and so basically I have an adventure story filled with all different kinds of ethnicities for no reason. There's just that's who the story is about. But even more than that, the biggest why for my story is I wanted to touch on the concept of emotional vulnerability within young men. I think there's because of fictional media to a point, Predator, right? You look at the 1987 Predator, and it's these muscle dudes who don't have feelings. But because of that, I feel like it kind of leads a lot of young men to think, oh, feelings are bad. I'm not supposed to have feelings.
Right.
But if you talk a lot or if you read a lot about emotional vulnerability, it's not about being overly emotional. It's just about knowing that your emotions are there, they're real, and you should manage them and listen to them because they're telling you things. And so one thing I wanted to try to do with this adventure story is have 2 main characters from 2 different perspectives. One is a young man about 20 to 25, and the other one's about 10 to 13 or so. And it's just me trying to use them as examples of kind of different.
And this is the first book series you're working on?
Yes.
So I was going to ask our expert panels over here, using the word expert and authorities, what advice, Jane and Neil, would you all give to Brian?
So, Brian, here, I'd offer you 2 invitations.
Please.
That's my coaching hat. So 2 invitations. One, eliminate the word try.
Okay.
You're already doing it.
Okay, yeah.
That's one invitation. Second invitation, some writers get caught up in, okay, what's the right way? What's the right process?
Yeah.
Ditch that.
Okay.
What's Brian's way? What's Brian's process? And stay with that.
All right. Oh, that's really helpful, actually. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Neil, thoughts of world-changing wisdom here? Yeah.
I mean, you're doing something that 84% of the population want to
Yeah.
do right now. And, you've just got to have the confidence to go forth and do that. And, it's going to be great when it's finally complete. It's something to be really proud of and
Thanks.
to market.
So do you have a timeline on that, or?
Yeah. It's going to be done next year.
Okay.
Yeah. So it should be out in 2020.
Good.
Okay, we're going to invite you back as an official authority.
Yeah, when I actually have a
And
book to
maybe
give out.
and Neil can help you with it being a best-selling author, not just an author.
Yeah.
And we'll have you on Author Talk Show for a follow-up.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
Did somebody have a question here? Or,
No, I just wanted to give my where you can find me information.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Rich, I failed to do that a while ago. You can find me at takethenextstep.cct.com or on Twitter, Jane Bishop.
And I had another question, I think, for Neil here. Neil, talk to us about industry trends. And anybody can jump in here, too. We talked about, a comic book. Those are hot. The coloring books, that was a cycle there for adults, whatever, right? The children's book. What are you seeing trending in the publishing industry, if you will? Because now you have ebooks. There's a lot of competing podcast, audio,
Yeah, ebooks are definitely a great thing, but it's being able to have that physical book and put it into somebody's hands. If you're going to an event and you can hand somebody a book, it never gets thrown away. I get business cards all the time, and, I don't even have a place to put them.
Yeah.
They go from my desk to the trash, usually.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to throw a book away. So having that physical book is paramount.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, we have a couple of your books still on the shelves of the studio. I have a couple at home to whatever, too. So now I have another one to add to the library.
There you go.
Jane, what are you seeing trending or the industry?
One of the things I'm seeing is that people are so getting caught up in wanting to have a publication, they're throwing something together, be it an ebook or a physical book. And I would encourage those people who are wanting to write a book, take the time to make sure that it's a good product, even if it's an ebook form.
Right.
When you slap it together and it looks like an afterthought, that does not bode well for your brand. And as Neil said earlier, he didn't use these words, but your brand is to make yourself be unique and memorable. You don't want to be unique and memorable for having a
sloppy project.
Sloppy project. So that's one of the trends that I'm seeing. So that's a negative trend.
Right, yeah.
Well, just to kind of, have another point with that, there are a lot of people out there that want to do the ultimate guide too, which is the
Yes.
all-encompassing book.
Yeah.
But, talking about more the micro-specialization, I just did an interview a couple of weeks ago with Donna Sardula, who is the expert on LinkedIn profiles. So that's the only thing that she does is LinkedIn profile. And there are so many things that you could write about LinkedIn, but she's picked one thing and she's written a whole book on how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. So it doesn't have to be this whole big thing that you have a 300-page book, but it's just focused information.
Yeah, it could be a series. You could take one thing and create a series like what I'm doing. So you could create a series, Brian, in your...
That's what you're working
Books.
on as well, right?
Yeah.
The sequential
absolutely.
part.
Yeah.
Sequential.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned series. Is that we've had conversations in the past about creating a compilation book and then making a series, right? I mean, I think everybody's authors, their the holy grail is to have the chicken soup for the soul, right?
Right.
I mean, so if you can create a franchise or a series, and Neil's just packing to it. Talk to us about this book. You just expert profiles. This is awesome.
Yeah,
Conversation with influencers and innovators.
That is exactly what you're talking about. During my podcast, I take the message that people share via the podcast and we put it into written format. The book's called Expert Profiles, which is conversations with influencers and innovators. And that's a good starting point. If somebody wants to write a book, it's a great place to start, just sharing how you're able to get your story out on paper to give you a good idea of how to do it for yourself. And of course, that is a best-selling book as well. So
I think all your books are, right?
They are.
they better be whatever. That's part of your personal brand, yeah. It's interesting. I mean, Nick and I, we were just having this conversation last week or 10 days ago about this series of books, right? And for Pro Business Channel, all the interviews that we've had with people, and we've talked about this. We just might feature one person in each chapter. Right, because that's something. Because one of the challenges we didn't really talk about, but it's kind of obvious in writing a book. That 84% that want to, the 1% that do, is it's overwhelming. It's daunting, right? Just looking at a blank page, right? But like you said, if you even have a conversation, and we can basically transcribe that conversation, polish it up, and then put it into a chapter, not an entire book. And I see one of the trends, as we're seeing visually here in the studio, is most books now are the quick paperback. I'm looking at one of your books is 109 pages, the other is 128, and one is 138 or something like that, right? So it's something that people can sit down, and read in one setting, or a couple of cups of coffee kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't feel so they're going to put that down, down the road at some point. And I'll just kind of finish on this. Speaking of that's a trend I see, right? In the 100-page sum, yes or yes?
Well,
yes.
What's a series or science about? Why is that?
Yes.
Another thing that people don't realize about this book, and it's a little bit sad because the authors put so much into writing the book and putting great content into the book. But especially if you have a business book, only about 10% of people that you give it to will get past the first chapter.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to be said for having a book and the authority that you get for just having a book or a best-selling book. It's really about that authority positioning. The fact that only 10% of people actually read it, that's to their detriment because they're not getting everything that they could get from it. But, it's more about the fact that you have a book.
But even that, if it's a 400-page hardbound or whatever, when I take a vacation or whatever, I'll read that, right?
Yeah,
but a book like this, I can just pick up, and like Jane, I think Jane was talking about, if you have, a 1,000-page book, put it in 10 different books, right?
Exactly.
As a series.
And that's why that's exactly, Neil, why the format of my book is little 2-page narrative.
Right.
They're bite-sized. They're slices. They're slices of life by the
There
slice.
it is,
No pun intended. And
it's
designed for people to read a couple of people, be encouraged, thought-provoking, put it down a couple of days later if they want to, pick it up again.
That's it.
And
that goes back to the digital attention span economy.
Absolutely.
We only have
Just quick.
to do.
And if you doubt the science behind this 100-page or less book, right? I mean, I'll just share this with you real quick. I'm a bit obsessed with the Shark Tank, right? So it's just a fascinating front row seat to billionaires and the way they think, their thought process, and then the interaction with the average person. They're all in, right? But beyond that, so seeing Mark Cuban and all the sharks. So I actually ordered Mark Cuban's book. Right? I thought I'll get this, just this huge book will land there on it'll take me a year to read it or whatever. These amazing, thoughts and insight. And a few weeks went by and I didn't really see the book and I forgot about it. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, what happened to my book from Mark Cuban, right? And then I went through my mail and there was a manila envelope that I hadn't opened. And I opened it up and it was a 71-page book by a billionaire. Right? So on one hand, I was a little disappointed. I'm thinking, where's my wealth of knowledge, whatever, right? But the other hand, I went to this. I thought, if this is the way a billionaire thinks that this needs to be presented, then yes?
And to,
you can rarely go wrong practicing the 3 C's. You can apply it to any aspect of writing, whether it's email or book. Clear, concise, and compelling.
Yeah.
You follow those 3 C's, you can rarely go wrong.
Yeah.
And throw Casanova in there as the last C.
Yeah, there you go.
To cement that point, Rich, I just ordered Kevin Harrington's new book.
Oh, yeah.
And
the original Shark Tank,
Yeah. When I got it, it wasn't even a book. It didn't even have a spine. It was printed paper stapled in the middle.
Oh, my gosh.
It was about the perfect pitch. But you know what? I read it quickly.
Yeah.
And the content, and it was great.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, we are officially overtime. Nick, are we overtime? Yes or yes? But this is a great show, right? Yeah. Thumbs up? All right. So on behalf of Nick, our engineer, Rich Casanova here for the Pro Business Channel, excited to share these first, hopefully a series of the Author Talk Show here on the Pro Business Channel. I want to thank all of our guests here one more time for joining us in the studio. And stay tuned for more conversations with authors.